Hi everyone, and welcome back to Exploring Plants with Julia and Erin. We're here again in the Gene Langenheim greenhouses on a gorgeous day to talk about water transport in plants. So in our last video, we talked about the basics of water transport and how it works. And now we're going to take those concepts and apply it to some real-life plant adaptations to different water environments. So here is a buckwheat. This is an Eriogonum is the genus. This is a California native. And if you look closely, you can see that on the tops of the leaves, there aren't too many hairs, and the bottoms are just white because they're absolutely covered with woolly hairs. The tops of leaves, generally speaking, have fewer stomata than the bottoms of the leaves. And now, knowing what we do about what happens at the stomata and how water pressure differentials dictate what happens, how do you think these hairs are modifying this plant's interaction with water? Basically, we have a layer of hairs that help trap some moisture around the stomata so that the difference in water potential within the leaf and the air isn't as severe, because right by the stomata where all the hairs are, those hairs are trapping a moist layer of air. So there's less of a difference, which means that the pulling from high water potential to lower water potential is less strong than it would be if it was directly interfacing with the drier air. So here we have another really cool plant that's certainly adapted to low water conditions. And there's a couple things I'll point out for you to think about before I tell you all the details. One is that this plant has what's called a glaucous coating. So it has a waxy coating. So you can see where my finger just rubbed, that wax is gone and it's on my finger. So it's this light waxy coating. And then the shape of the plant is also important to how this plant deals with low water conditions. Now that you've thought about it and thought about water relations, basically this glaucous coating, first of all, as it is lighter than the darker leaves underneath, helps reflect solar radiation, which reduces the evapotranspiration occurring from the leaves. And then there's this really cool thing where that wax, just like any wax, repels water. And so when you pour water on the leaf or near the plant, it gathers all that water down in the middle. You can even see the wax floating on that water. And that guides any water that falls on the whole plant, regardless of where, down into the base of the plant and eventually so it seeps down to where the roots are. Pretty cool. We'll do that again. Woo, look at that. Some of it's spilling out, but you can get the idea there of how the combination of the shape and the glaucous coating funnels the water for the plant. There are so many more really cool plant adaptations to different water conditions. I really encourage you to try and pay attention to your houseplants or plants out in the world and think about how they interact with water and how their characteristics might impact those interactions. It's pretty exciting and it makes a walk in the woods a heck of a lot more interesting. So enjoy. So here we are with another really cool plant. You may not recognize it, or you may, but you probably recognize it at this size. This is a redwood tree with its little babies over here. I'm in a redwood forest here on the UCSC campus, and redwoods have a really interesting relationship with fog. In California, we don't have rain during the summer months because we have a Mediterranean climate, but along the coasts, we get fog during those same summer months when there's heat inland that basically draws that fog in off of the ocean. Redwoods rely on that summer fog for their sources of both water and some nutrients, particularly nitrogen, during the summer. So as the fog rolls in from the ocean, it gets caught by the very tall trees and their branches, and much of it drips down into the understory, where then the redwoods can both take up the fog from the roots and share that water, not necessarily intentionally, with the understory plants around them. And that's a really key form of precipitation during the summer for those understory plants as well. Beyond that dripping of fog from above, The fog is critical for gas exchange at the leaf surface during summer months for redwoods. So you can imagine on a foggy day, things get slick with moisture. There's a layer of moisture or a layer of water that forms on the leaf surface. And as you know, air has a much more negative water potential than the leaf, but having a thin layer of water on top of the leaf means that the water potential within the leaf is actually less negative than the water in that thin layer on the surface of the leaf. So the plant is able to take some of that water up through its leaves, which is actually very unusual. The vast majority of plants that we know of cannot take water up from their leaves, but it also just reduces the negative pressure pulling water out of the stomata because there's less of a water potential differential. So the water potential of the water sitting on the leaf surface is less negative than the water potential of the air, and so more similar to the water potential in the leaf. And that's one of the other cool adaptations that plants have to stressful water conditions. There are so many more. Try and pay attention as you're walking around your house, looking at your house plants, as you're out in nature, and see if you can think about how water and plants are interacting in all sorts of